Debbie continues work on the clay while I'm at the foundry getting ready to make a bronze hoop.
So if you do this stuff at home, you might want to clean your kitchen up a little more than not clean up the foundry stove. That is, if you want to stay married, if you are married. Look how pretty. So about halfway through the dipping process, I added some wire to kind of beef this mold up. It just looks so spindly and weak. And wrap it as tight as I can. The wire's kind of stiff. It's hard to wrap really tight. But I wrap it and then dip it a few more times so the wire is encased in ceramic shell. And I believe in the long run it helps. And in this particular case,
So it was the beginning of August, so I was doing some spring cleaning, and these are the leftovers from the rope that's impregnated with epoxy. And I threw them away, and then I realized I ought to do a test on them to see what's going to happen. So I'm going to put this in the vise and put the torch on it. The worst thing that could happen would be that it get like foamy and expand, because then it could crack the ceramic shell mold. So if that happens, I'm going to be upset. The second worst thing that could happen is it doesn't burn. And it certainly doesn't burn very fast. I'm going to have to put some hours in the kiln to get rid of this stuff. So I'm in the shell room, and the first two molds, the base and the rope, are ready to go de-wax. I try to get like 3/8 of an inch of ceramic shell on the outside of the wax, so I know the dimension of the spruce, so it's kind of easy to tell. It's also kind of guesswork. I only had 2 molds break from pouring bronze in them, and they were both reliefs. They were big flat objects, and it puts a lot of tension on the corners. So since those 2 have broken up, I use wire on the corners of the reliefs, and I haven't had any more trouble. And all these weird shapes, I've never had one break pouring bronze in it. Now I've broken a bunch of them, knocking them over and dipping them and stuff, but pretty tough stuff. Once they're fired, they can take bronze. So these 3 are going to need a few more dips. These 2 today, we will start de-waxing.
my hooks are welded to a coil rod or a Dewey dag rod. It screws into a nut, which is welded to a little plate, which is embedded in this thick wax, and that's what holds these things up when I'm hanging them. This Dewey dag rod is pretty cool. It's a rolled thread. It's kind of looks like sand dunes. There's no sharp edges. It's case hardened, so one, it never clogs up, no matter how much grit and stuff, it's a construction industry product, so no matter how much concrete spillage is on them, you can still use them. And 2, because they're case hardened, you can beat them with a hammer to clean the shell off, in my case, and it doesn't mess up the threads. Now, in a perfect world, there wouldn't be all this ceramic shell on top of the cup, but I dipped this tall one upside down to try it because it's so long. So I'm just cleaning off all the mess before I start melting the wax.
I'm going to melt out this cup wax and get the metal embed out that's in there that the hook was screwed into.
I always burn out these wax cups before I put the mold in the kiln. There's a metal plate in this wax cup, and it's a big mass of wax, and it'd probably be the last thing to melt or start melting in the kiln, and it really needs to be the first thing because the wax in the mold is going to expand when it gets warm, and it needs a place to go or it'll crack the mold. So if you leave this big hunk in there, you're more than likely going to get a bunch of cracks in your mold. And if you remove it, it makes it real easy for the wax to start pouring out the bottom. And when I do it, I try to heat the cup, the ceramic shell, the outside, I not just put the torch on the wax because it just kind of burns it and makes it nasty where I got to throw it away. But if I heat the ceramic shell, it will come loose and fall out.
Cup is out, and we can see the top of the two ropes that need to come out next. So on this mold, you can see we've removed the cup wax and exposed the sprue wax, which melts at a real low temperature. So when we put it in the kiln, the sprue wax will go first and make way for the wax of the actual cast to expand, and that will minimize the hazard of the shell breaking. The shell can take heat, but it can't take expansion. So the kiln is on. The tall skinny one's not going to do much because it doesn't have much wax in it, but the chunky one has a lot of wax in it, so it's going to start melting, coming out. So the kiln is coming up to some temperature, and the wax starts coming out. First it's the red wax, that's the sprues, and then the brown wax, which is the model itself. And when all the wax finishes dripping, I will rearrange the kiln and bring the temperature up to about 15 or 1600 degrees, which will vitrify the molds and make them glass-like, make them tough. Okay, the wax quit dripping, so I turned off the kiln, took the molds out, put some insulation on top of my steel grate. I got a problem. If I heat the grate up too much, it warps and causes problems. Shut the bottom door, and I'm going to shut the front door, and I'm going to bring the temperature up to about 1700 degrees for a while and vitrify these two molds. Really set them well and see if any of that rope burns out of the tall skinny one. It'd be nice. Just turned off the fire. It's dropped 100 degrees in like 9 seconds. So we open up the kiln. The molds are very hot. I let them cool down and check out the inside, see what they look like. Woo. So it's been a little while. The pieces have cooled down. This is the mold for the base, and it has come out basically perfect. Snow white inside and out, so all the wax is gone, all the carbon deposits are burnt away. I'm just going to rinse it with water, and shortly before we pour browns, I'll heat it back up again. But this one suffered a crack on the end, which is not the end of the world, and a lot of the rope burnt out, but not all of it. So I'm going to try to clean a little bit of it out with a piece of wire. I don't want to damage the inside, and I'll put it back in there and heat it up again, and I'll just keep doing that until I should be able to see, because I cut the bottom of the ceramic shell mold off a little while ago, or before I fired it. I should be able to see straight through, and once we can see straight through, then I'll put that bottom back on there. So I messed around with a piece of brazing wire, and I could feel the little pieces of rope that are left in there moving around, but I was scared I was going to scratch the surface, the interior surface of the mold, and when we poured it, it would come out as a defect. So I got the air compressor on, and I got an air gun, and it just works super. Every time I put it in an end, something would blow out the opposite end. I went back and forth a few times. I eventually got some big chunks out. It was kind of fun, actually. So when I finished, I could put my eye down at the end, and I can see straight through both of them.
Now they're still all full of carbon. That's not acceptable because that carbon will react with bronze when you pour it. These molds need to be snow white, but that's no problem. It just needs to be fired some more.
Okay, the rope is out totally. I can see from one end to the other, but blowing the compressed air in there with that black carbon, it showed that I have several cracks along the length. So what I'm going to do before I put it back in the kiln to clean out the carbon deposits, I'm going to wrap it with the wire again, and then I'm going to put another couple of coats of ceramic shell on it, just to make sure it's strong. And I have to plug the bottom too, where I cut the bottom off. The carbon really lets me see these cracks. I didn't realize it was so cracked up. I guess the rope expanded a little bit and didn't have anywhere to go. But I believe that wrapping this thing with wire actually saved it. Now I'm going to wrap it with some more wire. It's a little more awkward this time because last time I could hang it from the hook and pivot it. Now I got to roll it on a table. And it's already kind of compromised, so it's a little nerve-wracking. This is the ceramic insulation. This is that white stuff that's on my table. It's good to 2600 degrees. It's getting kind of old and just physically falling apart. But it can still take the temperature. So I'm plugging this bottom hole that I cut. I cut the bottom of the mold off. I want to do this first because I don't want the ceramic shell to go up inside it at all.
Adding a quick little splash of stucco right here.
So now that I've dried that out, I can go ahead and dip it the whole way. That's what happens when you don't wash your brush. It turns into a rock. I don't have a hook to hang it from, so this is going to be kind of hard, but we're going to hang here for a little while. Okay, what we'll do, we'll turn the air on. Pull the excess off. Dip it in coarse sand. think I turned my compressor off. Okay, we have saved the mold. I believe this is going to work fine. Give it. These molds need 3 more dips, and I'll give the rope mold 3 more dips, and then I'll burn it out again.